Catacombs of Paris, 6 million skulls beneath the city streets. Paris, the city of light, lovers, art, and elegance. Millions of tourists every year stroll along the Champs-Élysées, admire the Eiffel Tower, and soak up the atmosphere of French romanticism. But few of them realize what is a few meters below their feet. Deep beneath the city streets stretches a vast network of tunnels that once served as quarries. Over time, they have become one of the world's largest ossuaries. 6 million human remains, thousands of skulls and bones, arranged in walls, columns, and arches. These are the Catacombs of Paris, a place that combines history, death, and architecture in a way that is unique in the world. In this episode, we will tell you how these underground areas were created, why the remains of millions of dead were moved there, and what is hidden today in the corridors beneath one of the most famous cities in Europe. Part 1. Old mines under the city, the stone foundations under which the labyrinth was born. To understand why there is a network of corridors under Paris that is longer than many a motorway, we have to go back in time, over 2,000 years. Already in Roman times, the inhabitants of the region of Lutetia, as ancient Paris was called, extracted from the underground a raw material without which this city would not have been built: limestone. Limestone was not only a building material here, it was its heart. It was used to build temples, walls, and later tenement houses and cathedrals. In time, an entire underground network of workings was created. The corridors dug into the ground created an irregular spiderweb, unplanned, chaotic, and devoid of documentation. Hundreds of years later, this would become the foundation of the catacombs. In the Middle Ages and in the following centuries, mining did not cease. With each new building, with each expansion of the city, they dug further, deeper. However, safety was not always taken care of. As a result, some districts of Paris literally stood on the edge of emptiness. There were even collapses. The ground collapsed under houses, and entire blocks began to slide. In the mid-18th century, there was a need to investigate and organize the underground structures. In 1777, the mining inspection was created, a special city unit that was supposed to map and secure the existing tunnels. This was not done out of curiosity. It was about the survival of the city. If not for this decision, Paris could literally fall apart. And just when they were beginning to look to the underground as a structure to save the city's surface, disaster struck. But not from deep within the earth, but from the surface itself. Part 2. Cemeteries full of decay, when the dead became a problem for the city. In the second half of the 18th century, Paris not only grew upwards and expanded into new districts, it also grew inwards, but not in a natural way. The city literally began to swell with the dead. The cemeteries could not keep up with the pace of death. The situation was particularly dramatic at the Cemetery of the Innocents, one of the oldest and largest in Paris. It had existed since the Middle Ages and for centuries had buried the poor, the clergy, and victims of epidemics. Over time, it became a place of horror. The graves were dug up many times, and new bodies were placed on top of the old remains, often shallow below the surface. In the summer, the stench was unbearable. Neighboring buildings absorbed the stench of decay. Dampness from the bodies began to appear in the basements, and the walls cracked in places from the pressure of unburied remains. In 1780, something happened that made it impossible to ignore the situation any longer. After heavy rainfall, the wall separating the cemetery from the neighboring house collapsed. Dozens of rotting bodies slid into the basement of the apartment building. Residents fled in panic. The city authorities were faced with the necessity of a radical decision. At the same time, the science of public health was developing. Enlightenment doctors and philosophers began to warn. Decaying remains in the city center were not just an aesthetic problem. They were a serious health hazard. People began to link the occurrence of epidemics with overcrowding in cemeteries. People got sick, children died, and residents increasingly loudly demanded change. So the decision was made. The overcrowded cemeteries had to be emptied. But where to move the millions of remains? The answer lay right underfoot, in the disused limestone quarries. Part 3. Sentence into darkness. Millions of remains and nightly processions underground. In 1786, a decision was made that would change the Parisian underground forever. The city authorities, together with the mining inspectorate, decided that the bones from the overflowing cemeteries would be moved to the old limestone quarries. This is how the idea of the catacombs was born. But this operation was not easy, neither technically nor emotionally. The transfer of remains began in the most crowded and problematic cemetery, the Cemetery of the Innocents. In order to avoid outrage and protest from residents, it was decided that the entire process would take place only at night. For many months, horse-drawn carts covered with black cloth roamed the streets of Paris after dark. They were accompanied by priests with torches, reciting prayers for the dead. Parisians watched these silent processions from their windows, in silence, often with fear. The remains were thrown into deep shafts leading to former mines. At first, there was chaos there. Bones were stored haphazardly, often in piles reaching the ceiling. In time, however, they began to take shape. The mine inspector, Louis-Étienne Héricard de Thury, commissioned the site to be transformed into something more than just a bone storage facility. It was to be an underground ossuary, orderly and dignified. The bones began to be arranged in regular patterns. Skulls and femurs formed walls, arches, columns. Between them appeared tablets with Latin and French quotes, often reminding us of the transience of life. In this way, something completely new was created, a place that was at once a tomb, a monument, and an artistic construction. The transfer operation took years. The last remains were not transferred to the catacombs until the mid-19th century. In total, the remains of some 6 million people were transferred there, more than the population of the entire city at the time. Part 4. The Rise of the Catacombs, a tomb transformed into a monument to death. After millions of remains had been moved underground, the Paris ossuary began to take on a new character. At first, it was merely a storage area for bones, austere, chaotic, and disturbingly claustrophobic. But soon, the place began to take shape and meaning. In the years from 1810 to 1814, under the direction of the aforementioned Louis-Étienne Héricard de Thury, a great transformation began. He decided that the catacombs should not be just a forgotten cemetery. Inspired by the Roman catacombs and the spirit of the Romantic era, which valued reflection on death and transience, he transformed them into a kind of underground monument. Walls made of skulls and femurs began to be arranged in regular geometric structures. Walls of death, colonnades, semicircular arches, and even crosses made of skulls were created. A system of markings was introduced. Each section of the ossuary had a plaque informing which cemetery the bones came from and when they were moved. Additionally, there were quotes from the Bible, philosophical texts, and reflections on death. The most famous inscription visible at the entrance to the main part reads, "Arrête, c'est ici l'empire de la mort," or, "Stop, here begins the empire of death." In 1814, the catacombs were officially opened to the public, initially only for select guests, artists, scientists, and aristocrats. Over time, regular visits began to be organized, and the place gained notoriety. It became one of the most unusual points on the map of Paris, combining history, art, and horror. Although the official part of the catacombs covers only a small section of the entire underground network, this particular fragment has become the hallmark of the place, a showcase of death that you can come face to face with. Part 5. Secret Passages and Cataphils, the underground world out of control. The official tourist route of the Paris catacombs is less than 2 kilometers long. Meanwhile, the entire network of underground corridors under the city is over 300 kilometers long. It is a labyrinth that stretches under dozens of districts, most of which is inaccessible, at least by law, but not for everyone. In the second half of the 20th century, a new group of people emerged, cataphiles. They are underground enthusiasts who decided to explore the forbidden parts of the catacombs on their own. For many of them, it is more than a hobby. It is a lifestyle, a passion, and sometimes even a form of art. They move through hidden entrances, through basements, sewage manholes, and even underground passages in the metro. Sometimes, some entrances lead straight from forgotten staircases or abandoned buildings. The cataphils create their own maps, marking systems, and even organize illegal events, from nighttime gatherings to art installations deep in the corridors. Some paint walls, leave sculptures, arrange lights, creating a kind of underground gallery. In some places, you can come across leftover picnics, candles, and even makeshift beds. The Paris authorities have been fighting against illegal exploration of the catacombs for years. In 1980, a special police unit was established, La Police de Catacombes, which patrols the underground, arrests illegal wanderers, and secures the entrances. Despite this, the phenomenon has not waned. On the contrary, it has gained cult status. You can find forums, photos, and reports of expeditions on the internet, although most cataphiles do not reveal their exact locations. A kind of code of silence applies. Catacombs off the tourist trail are a completely different world. There is no lighting, and often no oxygen. Every step could mean a landslide, a ceiling collapse, or losing your way. For some, however, it is this risk that gives meaning to the whole exploration. Part 6. Lost in the Labyrinth. When an underground adventure turns into a nightmare. The multi-layered and unmarked labyrinth of corridors under Paris is not only a space for explorers, but also a place that can absorb a person forever. Despite prohibitions and risks, the catacombs have been attracting people hungry for excitement for decades. Unfortunately, some of them never return. There have been disappearances that are still legendary. One of the most famous involves an anonymous cameraman whose footage was supposedly found in the 1990s by a group of cataphiles. The footage shows the man wandering alone through the corridors, becoming increasingly disoriented until he finally abandons the camera and disappears into the darkness. This footage was later used in the documentary The Catacombs and helped to give rise to the urban legend of the man who never came back. Although the authenticity of this recording is now disputed, many consider it staged. The subject of disappearances is not fiction. Police reports include cases of people who entered the catacombs through illegal entrances and were unable to get out for hours, sometimes days. In 2017, 2 teenagers spent 3 days underground without light or food before being found by emergency services. They survived, but suffered hypothermia and dehydration. Walking through the catacombs is not just a physical risk. Being locked in the dark, surrounded by walls of bones, can cause hallucinations, panic, and disorientation. Even experienced explorers take spare batteries, water, maps, and inform friends of the route, yet not everyone emerges unscathed. The catacombs are a fascinating place, but they do not forgive mistakes. For some, they become the last point on the map of their lives. Part 7. Catacombs Today and Their Significance. Between a tourist attraction and a monument to death. The modern catacombs of Paris are a place with 2 faces. On the one hand, a popular tourist attraction, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors from all over the world every year. On the other, a deeply symbolic space, carrying a message about transience, history, and the limits of human life. The official route, provided by the Paris Municipal Museum, starts on the Avenue de Colonel Henri Roll-Tanguy, near Denfert-Rochereau. The entrance is via a spiral staircase, descending to a depth of about 20 meters, about the depth of a 6-story building. Visitors pass through cool, damp corridors to come face to face with millions of remains, arranged into walls and structures that today inspire both fascination and disquiet. The rules are strict. You can't touch the bones, take anything out, or go off the marked route. Despite the supervision, many people try to get around the rules. The internet is still full of accounts of illegal expeditions, photos of unavailable parts of the labyrinth, and directions to the closed entrances. Over the years, the catacombs have also become a subject of debate. Should they be open to the public? Should the resting place of millions of people be closed, treated like a cemetery? City officials say the ossuary also serves an educational purpose and serves as a reminder of Paris's turbulent history. For many, it is not only a place of remembrance, but also a place of reflection on the nature of death. The quotes found in the catacombs often pose unanswered questions. One of them reads, "Where is death if life survives in memory?" Today, the catacombs are a mirror that reflects our attitude towards transience. Is it a monument to humility, a warning, or maybe just a strange dark attraction? Everyone must answer this question for themselves. 6 million human beings. So many stories that have never been told. The catacombs of Paris are not just an underground labyrinth. They are a huge, silent witness to the past. A place that reminds us that even the largest city can hide another, silent, dark, and forgotten, beneath its surface. What do you think about it? Would you dare to go down there yourself and turn off the light? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. See you in the next episode of the Unknown Tales Files.